There's something that the mainstream media doesn't talk nearly enough about, and that's the health insurance companies denying legitimate claims. These are companies that are supposed to have your back when you're at your most vulnerable, but instead they're out here playing games with your money and your health. And so in this video, we're going to talk about all the different tactics they use to deny your legitimate health insurance claims. And these are not just random mistakes or misunderstandings. These are deliberate strategies that they've designed to save them money while leaving you holding the bag. So today we're diving into the shady world of health insurance claim denials. And I'm going to break down the most common tactics these companies use to deny claims that should absolutely be paid out. So by the end of this, you'll not only understand how they operate, but also how to protect yourself from getting scammed by the very people you're paying to protect you. And so let's start with misinterpreting policy terms. This is one of their favorite moves. Let's say you've got a policy. Maybe it's a little confusing because, let's be honest, these things are written in legalese. That might as well be hieroglyphics. But you think that you're covered, right? Well, insurance companies, they love to twist the language of their own policies to deny your claim. For example, they might say that a treatment your doctor prescribed is experimental or investigational. Now, what does this even mean? It means whatever they want it to mean. They'll argue that a procedure isn't proven enough, even if it's been used successfully for years and it's considered standard practice by medical professionals. Why? Because if they can slap that label on it, they don't have to pay. There was a commenter on Reddit I found that gave an example of this, where his insurance company did try to deny him surgery for 3 days pre-op when he was only 15 years old. His mom got a message that they were initially denied coverage because the surgery was deemed experimental because he wasn't 16 years or older and his growth plates weren't closed yet. In another example, I found this comment on Reddit. Someone who had cancer last year, but his insurance had denied the blocking for his radiation. They covered the radiation, but they said that the blocking was experimental. Thankfully, however, this denial was after the fact because the radiation actually worked wonders on the tumor. And of course, he fought the case because it was $16,000. The hospital ended up eating the cost because they couldn't figure out why it was denied either. And so the insurance company did end up eating the cost of it because they too couldn't figure out why it was denied either. That's right. Even the insurers often can't figure out why they deny coverage, but they know that most people won't challenge them on it, and so they bank on you being too overwhelmed or too sick to fight back. And next up we have the delaying the claims process, the classic stall tactic. Picture this. You file a claim and then nothing. Weeks go by, maybe months, you call them up, and suddenly they need more documentation, a form they already sent you, or some obscure piece of information they never mentioned before. It's like playing fetch with a dog that keeps losing the ball. And this is intentional. They're not just disorganized. They're hoping you'll give up out of sheer frustration or desperation. And for some people, especially with those dealing with serious illnesses or financial stress, giving up starts to feel like the only option. Just take a look at this clip by someone who actually used to work in the industry.
Her husband had just passed from pancreatic cancer, and this was a hospice claim. They were already garnishing her wages, and this was less than 60 days after he died. By the way, she was left with 5 boys by herself. There was absolutely no reason why we couldn't just submit this claim and be done. But they told me every which way to deny this, to get her off of our phone line.
That's right, these insurance companies train their employees to deny and to delay claims in any way possible. Now let's talk about downplaying medical necessity, another favorite trick in their playbook. Here's how it works. Your doctor says you need a specific treatment or procedure, but the insurance company swoops in and says, actually, we don't think that's necessary. Excuse me? Since when did an insurance adjuster become more qualified than a licensed medical professional?
Let's jump in. Okay, so what is medical necessity? So medical necessity is what insurance companies use to determine whether or not they're going to pay for a service. So it's the same thing as if you needed a surgery. Then insurance companies don't just approve surgery for every person, right? They only approve surgery if it's needed. So the doctor needs to describe what is wrong and how the surgery is going to correct that. Same thing with therapy. So insurance companies are using that exact same model to determine whether or not therapy is needed.
You see, they'll use their own hired doctors, people who've never even met you, to review a case and decide your treatment isn't medically necessary. And let me tell you, these reviews aren't exactly impartial. They're paid by insurance companies, so guess whose side they're on? It's not yours. And then there's the pre-existing condition blame game. This one is especially infuriating because it feels like gaslighting on a corporate level. Let's say you have a legitimate claim for something completely new, a broken bone, for instance. But they dig through your medical history and they find something unrelated from years ago to pin it on. Oh, you broke your leg skiing? Well, we see here that 5 years ago you had knee pain after running a marathon. So this must be related to that pre-existing condition. What? It's absurd logic, and it works because most people don't know how to push back against it. And don't even get me started on misclassifying treatments or providers. See, this is where they start playing games with networks and billing codes. You go to an in-network hospital for surgery. You've done everything right, but then they hit you with a massive bill because one of the anesthesiologists was out of network. How are you supposed to know that? Were you supposed to stop mid-surgery and ask everyone in the room if they were in network? Of course not. But insurance companies use this loophole all the time because it lets them deny part or all of your claim. Now let's move on to technicalities and clinical errors, which might sound harmless, but are actually one of their most effective weapons. Did you misspell something on your claim form? Denied. Did your doctor accidentally use the wrong billing code? Denied. Did you submit your paperwork 1 day late because you were in the hospital recovering from surgery? Denied. These aren't innocent mistakes. They're traps designed into the system. The more hoops they make you jump through, the more likely it is that something will go wrong. And when it does go wrong, they get to keep their money. And then finally, this one really gets me. They'll accuse you of non-compliance. They'll say that you didn't follow the procedures properly or you failed to provide enough documentation, when in reality, they've made the requirements so convoluted that even a lawyer would struggle to figure it out. It's like being penalized for not following rules they never told you about in the first place. Oh, and by the way, did you know that insurers monitor your social media? If you post a vacation photo while claiming disability benefits, you can be denied. Just take a look at this clip here.
Last tactic I want to talk about is, and this is becoming an issue because more people are home and more people are in front of their computers, is the use of their social media. And I mean, can MetLife look at that? Can they use that against a person? And how often do they do that?
They do it a lot. And my clients are always surprised and they'll say, well, I'm on private. How do they see what I'm posting? And somehow they always seem to get into the Facebook, the Instagram, people's LinkedIn. They find everything. And even if you're not posting and you have a friend or a relative that's tagging you in pictures, they're finding these. So the problem is, if you're saying you can't do certain things, yet you're in a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a picture doesn't always portray how you're actually feeling in the moment. But if you're smiling or you're out, you know, with a bunch of people, or you're doing something physical and you post it on social media, they use that against you to say that, well, obviously you're not as bad as you claim. You know, you look happy, you look like you're out here being physical, you're at a party, you're dancing. So clearly, if you can do all of that, you absolutely can work. And that's not always the case. You know, a lot of people will pose for a picture and they're in pain, but they'll smile in the moment and you can't really tell from the picture how they're really feeling. So I tell all of my clients, do not post anything on social media. Be very careful. Please ask your friends not to tag you and your family members, because it just gives them ammunition that it's not necessary.
You see, this is how far these companies will go to deny your coverage. They will literally go out there and find pictures of you smiling with your family on social media posts and use it as a reason to deny your coverage. Because if you're smiling and you're happy, you can't actually be in need of health insurance. Now here's why all this matters. They aren't just isolated incidents or honest mistakes. These are deliberate strategies baked into how health insurance companies operate. Think about it. They make money by collecting premiums from millions of policyholders every month. But every time they pay out a claim, that cuts into their profits. So what do? They create systems designed to minimize payouts while maximizing confusion and frustration for policyholders like us. And unless we know how these tactics work and how to fight back, we're basically sitting ducks. And so let me show you exactly how to protect yourself from these tactics and what steps you can take if your claim is denied. So let's break this down into 3 parts: how to protect yourself before a claim is filed, what to do when a claim is denied, and how to avoid falling into the same traps in the future. First up, steps to protect yourself against denied claims. The best defense is a good offense, right? And when it comes to insurance companies, it means being proactive. Now, the first thing you need to do here is you have to understand your policy. I know. Reading an insurance policy is about as much fun as watching paint dry. But trust me, it's worth it. You need to know exactly what your policy covers, and more importantly, what it doesn't cover. You need to look for exclusions, pre-authorization requirements, and coverage limits. If something doesn't make sense, call your insurance company and ask questions. Don't let them hide behind vague language. Because here's the thing, if you don't know your policy inside and out, they'll use that against you. They'll deny your claim and say, oh, well, it's just in the policy. And if you didn't read it, you'll be in trouble. The next thing is you need to provide accurate information. And this might sound obvious, but you'd be surprised at how many claims get denied because of small mistakes, like a typo in your personal information or a missing document. Double check everything before you submit it. And if your doctor or hospital is handling the paperwork for you, follow up with them to make sure everything is correct. The third thing is keep detailed records, and this one is huge. Every time you talk to an insurance company, whether it's over the phone or via email, write it down. Write down who you spoke to, what was said, and when the conversation happened. Keep copies of every form you submit and every letter you send. Why? Because if they try to deny your claim later on, having a paper trail can be a lifesaver. And then you need to get pre-authorization when possible. If your policy requires pre-authorization for certain treatments or procedures, and most do, make sure you get it before moving forward. And don't just take their word for it over the phone. Get it in writing. And finally, stick with in-network providers whenever possible. I know this isn't always an option, especially in emergencies, but staying in-network reduces the chances of surprise bills or out-of-network denials. Now, the second part to this is how to appeal a denied claim. All right, so let's say that you've done all of that. You've been proactive, you've stayed on top of everything, and you still get your claim denied. What now? Well, the first thing you need to do is review the denial reason carefully. When they deny your claim, they're required to send you an explanation of benefits or a denial letter explaining why. Read this carefully because sometimes the reasoning doesn't even make sense or isn't consistent with your policy terms. For example, they might say something like treatment not medically necessary or that service is not covered under policy. If that doesn't add up based on what you know about their policy, or if it feels like a stretch, that's your first clue that you might have grounds for an appeal. The second thing is to gather the supporting documentation, and this is where those detailed records that we talked about earlier come in handy. Collect everything, your medical records, your bills, letters from your doctor explaining why the treatment was necessary, and organize it all into a clear case. And speaking of doctors, ask yours for help. Many healthcare providers are willing to write letters of medical necessity or even get on the phone with the insurance company and advocate for you. Next, submit a written appeal. Most insurance companies have an appeals process outlined in their denial letter or on their website. So follow their instructions carefully and submit a written appeal addressing their specific denial reason. And here's the key. Keep it professional but firm. Reference your policy terms and include any supporting evidence that backs up your case. And don't be afraid to call them out if their denial doesn't align with what's in your policy. Now, the next thing is you need to request a peer-to-peer review. And this is where your doctor can speak directly with the insurance company's medical reviewer to make the case for why your treatment was necessary. It's not always an option, but when it is, it can be incredibly effective. Another thing you can do is escalate if necessary. If your appeal gets denied again, or if they're just dragging their feet, you can file a complaint with your state's insurance department or even consider hiring an attorney who specializes in health insurance disputes. And so let's move on to the last part, preventative measures for future claims. Because once you've dealt with one denied claim, the last thing you want to do is go through that nightmare again. The first thing here is you actually have to review your policy regularly. Insurance companies love to make changes, sometimes subtle ones, to their policies without drawing too much attention to them. So make it a habit to review the policy at least once a year or whenever you renew it, to make sure there haven't been any changes that could affect your coverage. The next thing is you need to stay proactive about deadlines and about documentation. Most claims have strict filing deadline, and missing them is one of the easiest ways for an insurer to deny payment outright. So set reminders if you have to, but don't let deadlines slip by unnoticed. The next thing is to build relationships with patient advocacy organizations or legal resources ahead of time. There are nonprofits and advocacy groups out there whose sole purpose is helping people navigate health insurance disputes. And knowing where to turn to for help before things go wrong can save you a lot of stress later on. And finally, this one might sound obvious, but bear with me. Don't be afraid to switch insurers if yours has a track record of shady behavior. Not all health insurance companies are created equal. Some are far worse than others when it comes to denying claims or playing games with coverage terms. So there you have it, a roadmap for protecting yourself from denied claims before they happen, fighting back when they do, and avoiding future headaches down the line. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about money. It's about standing up for yourself against a system that often feels rigged against us all. And while these companies might have deep pockets and armies of lawyers, we've got something just as powerful: knowledge and persistence.